Hey, it's Drake, and I'm gonna make a short, relatively low effort video. Well, the background to this took a lot of effort, but the video itself will be low effort. And I've moved again. I think I mentioned it, maybe I didn't, but at our last apartment that we moved into a little bit of a month and 2 to 3 weeks ago, after being there for 4 days, we had a pool in our bedroom, and two bookshelves got messed up. One of them was completely ruined. We had to just throw it away. The other one is kind of messed up. We should replace it. But anyway, yeah, so we ended up moving again. So now I've had to pack up all of my books and unpack them and organize them twice in the last 2 months. And I have too many books. Well, I don't have too many, but I have a lot of books. And yeah, a lot. Like, I think for me, I have about 700 to 800 total. And as you can see, still working on unpacking them. But I thought I would just make a video on how I'm organizing at least two of my shelves. I had to buy some more, but at least two for now. And I do like how I have this set up so far. So basically what it is the history of the English language and its literatures. So we start with Skeat's Concise Etymological Dictionary of the English Language, Word Hoard, Introduction to Old English, Beowulf, and so on. As you see, we get to Chaucer, Shakespeare in the middle, Anatomy of Melancholy, and then at the very bottom of the shelf on the right here, we end up with contemporary, or more or less contemporary. Alexander Through, Ralph Ellison, Frank Stanford, and so on. So I thought today, since I already made a video at my last apartment of modernism in English, I will start on the other end then, because my modernism in English is up here basically. And on the other end we have, I already started naming them off, the oldest works in the English language. Not all of them, I'm still missing quite a few actually, but these are the ones that I have that are either representative for the language of the time or because they're just excellent works of literature that everyone should have. So yeah, we'll just see how far I get. I'm not sure how far I'm going to do in this video, but figured I'd just start recording and see how it goes. So this here, Skeat was one of the early, if not one of the founders of the early English Text Society, which is these brown volumes. I have multiple of them. And he was extremely well versed in the history of the English language, its literature, word etymology over time, linguistics of English, and because of that, he made an etymological dictionary. Now, I first found out about this dictionary from Joyce, James Joyce, because he loved this dictionary. I'm pretty sure he read the complete one. This is the concise version. The complete one is very long. I think there's a reprinting of it that is 1,000 pages and it's extremely small print. So at this point, I've just gotten the concise etymological dictionary, but it is fascinating. Like if you look up the word read, that's a nice one to look up. So and then yeah, getting into Beowulf, I've worked pretty hard to get the best editions for me of Beowulf. So Kleber's Beowulf is the authoritative academic version. It has the original text and a good 100 and something pages of introduction that really tells you everything you'll need to know about when it was written, how it was written, the intellectual backgrounds of the author, yeah, all that stuff. The next, I've talked about this one before, but this is the facsimile of the manuscript. And this book, that it exists, is especially amazing, Beowulf, because it was in a fire in the early 1700s. And the story goes that it was thrown out of a window, and that's the only reason that it survived the fire, because it was high priority, because they knew what they had. So pretty amazing. And then this one here, this starts another one of my favorite series. So this is Early English Text Society. I think you can read it there. Yeah, Early English Text Society. Highly, highly recommend checking that out if you like these older works. It was kind of like opening a whole new world of reading whenever I discovered the Early English Text Society. Also, felt the same way when I found this Dumbarton Oaks series from Harvard University Press. And this first one here is the Beowulf manuscript. Now, Beowulf wasn't preserved on its own. It wasn't in its own book. It was also in a collection with other works, like a work called Judith. There's letters between Aristotle and Alexander the Great. There is a work called Wonders of the East, which is especially amazing because it basically gives you an idea of what someone in Anglo-Saxon England thought of the Middle East and just the East in general. You know, of course, it's kind of unbelievable things that it's crazy that people actually thought these things in one way, but in another way, it's very reasonable with the crazy stuff people believe today. But, you know, it'll be, I can't remember a specific accurate example, but it'll be something like, you know, a horse with a man's body, you know, and they'll just say, oh yeah, and that's really there. Or they'll describe birds that are like the size of a T-Rex or something like that. It's like, oh, no way, there's no way. Of course, they didn't use the T-Rex reference, but the very large bird, very large ostrich type of thing. Then next we have Old English Shorter Poems, Wisdom and Lyric. I prioritized that volume. There is another volume that has religious and didactic poetry, which I've been meaning to get, just haven't gotten it yet. But this one, I especially like the wisdom and lyric poetry, mainly for the wisdom poetry, because that includes things like the Seafarer, the Wanderer, Deor, the Ruin. And those I would certainly say are some of the most beautiful poems written in any language. And one thing I forgot to mention, these are nice. I know I've talked about these before, but these are nice because they're bilingual. So they have the original Old English and then a modernized current day English. And I love that. Any chance I get, I try to do that. And speaking of these wisdom and lyric poems, a lot of them come from the Exeter book, which is the largest single collection of Old English poetry, you know, short poetry. And it also has a lot of riddles. And that is one book from this series that I've been meaning to get, but it's moving and everything, and it's fairly expensive. The Anglo-Latin riddle tradition is what it's called. It has a volume of about 1,000 pages of riddles. And then it has a companion volume, which has commentary on the riddles, solutions to the riddles, just a general background of what's the deal with riddles, why were they so popular. And part of the reason I want to get that is because books like Finnegan's Wake, you know, effectively you can view that as a series of riddles. And I just think that's fascinating that it goes back so far, and that it's almost just an obvious game that people would play with language. So that's the Exeter book. This is just the original Old English. And there's also the Junius manuscript, the Vercelli manuscript, and names blanking on the fourth one. But there are 4 major collections of Old English poetry, and this is the largest of them. Then we get to 2 more of the Dumbarton Oaks. We have the Old English Boethius, which I thought was fascinating because it has, of course, Boethius is the 5th century classical scholar. Some people call him the last classical scholar before the so-called Dark Ages. This is fascinating because it uses Old English mythological figures to stand in for the Latin mythological figures. It was translated around the time of Alfred the Great, and I think it's even credited to Alfred the Great, but it's almost certain that he didn't do it. It was probably one of his scholars or his tutors in his court. And then speaking of that, the history of the kings of Britain. I haven't really read this one too much, but the reason I was fascinated with that is because it's comparison with Geoffrey of Monmouth, and I wanted to read about England in its own language, so that's why I got that. And then continuing on, we have Leomond's Brut, and also the Everyman's Library translation, so that I can check myself on the early Middle English. Leomond's Brut is fascinating. J.R.R. Tolkien said that it was the equivalent of the Old Norse Eddas in English, because it tells so much about the early kind of folk wisdom and culture of the early English period. I think Leomond's Brut was written around the year 1100. I haven't checked my dates, but that's within 50 years. Then of course we have Chaucer. I have the Riverside Chaucer. I do also have an edition that is a facsimile of the Hengwort manuscript, but of course doesn't fit here, so I didn't include it. Also, I think the Chaucer is making this shelf bend, so I might have to have another stand-in of at least the Canterbury Tales. Maybe put this somewhere else. Then we have Pearl Cleanness, Patience, and Sir Gawain. This one is a facsimile in the manuscript as well, and that's of the Cotton Nero. Cotton is the last name of a antiquarian that saved many old manuscripts after the dissolution of the monasteries. I think Pearl is one of the most beautiful poems in the English language as well. If you haven't read it, read it as soon as you quit watching this video. John Lydgate's The Fall of Princes. Now, The Fall of Princes is based on John Bocchus, or John Bocchus, I don't know how he would have said it, but Boccaccio. It's based on Boccaccio, translation. But he adds stuff, takes stuff out that he thought was boring or not worth putting in. So it's one of those just fascinating translations from the early modern period or Middle English period, where they were very, very loose with what a translation was. And Lydgate was very influenced by Chaucer. I need to get John Gower. That's another thing I wanted to say. If you notice I have any major gaps, like I probably know what I'm missing, but if you have a high recommendation of something I'm missing, a specific edition, just let me know, because I do want to fill this in more. You'll see as we get further down, I do have gaps that I need to fill. So yeah, just please mention anything you notice that I'm missing that's significant. I'll try to mention the major ones that I do have that just aren't up here. Then we have Thomas Malory, the big compendium of King Arthur mythology. Ovid's Metamorphoses, translated by Arthur Golding. That's the one that Shakespeare would have read, translated in the mid-1500s. Then we get down here to Elizabethan handwriting. That's a pretty fascinating book I found several months ago that gives you the different scripts that manuscripts or letters or notes would have been written in the Elizabethan period. And I really wanted that because, as you guys know, I really like original manuscripts and facsimiles. So I want to have something to reference if I'm ever reading a manuscript, handwritten manuscript. Then we have good old Edmund Spenser, one of the weirdest writers, I would say, at least for the modern period. Faerie Queene. Then I have this edition of his complete poetical works. I want to get a better edition. I like to have things more split up than whole editions like this, and I already have quite a lot of his stuff anyway. I also have the Penguin version of his shorter poetry, so I really have everything, but just had that up there. And then I have my facsimile of the two volumes, 2 parts of the Faerie Queene, and this is a facsimile of the, see if my memory's right. No, my memory is not right. It's also getting kind of late. Late 1590s. I can't remember exactly when the second volume was put out, because the first one was just the first 3 books, and then the second one was the second 3 books, and it was changed around a little bit. Then we have Lancelot Andrewes, who went to school with Edmund Spenser. Richard Mulcaster was the schoolmaster. Really an amazing teacher, because both Edmund Spenser and Lancelot Andrewes knew, I don't know how many Spenser knew exactly, but Lancelot Andrewes knew like 24 languages. Lancelot Andrewes also helped translate the King James Version of the Bible, but he was very well known in his time for his sermons. And he was known for this extreme metaphysical style of sermons. That's the word. Very intricate, very elusive, very it's almost like his sermons like fold back in on themselves, and it's like a kaleidoscope almost. I do want to make a video about him pretty soon. And then here next we have Shakespeare, and I don't have my Riverside Shakespeare up here or my Norton facsimile of the first folio. They just wouldn't fit. It would probably break my shelves. So I have those elsewhere, but here I have the Shakespeare Sonnets, the edition by Yale, which has a facsimile and then a modernized version facing. So that's really nice to be able to read the original, but then also make sure you know what it's saying. Then next year I have these 2-volume Shakespeare's England by Oxford, published by Oxford. And I like this one because it just has a bunch of essays written by different experts about different parts of basically Elizabethan society. So it'll tell you what the theater was like, what like daily life was like in Shakespeare's time, what London was like, what literate culture was like, books and things like that. So it's really nice just to dip into that while you're reading Shakespeare. If you catch something that you're like, oh, that's unusual, or I want to learn more about that, I kind of turn to the Shakespeare's England, and it helps me learn a little bit more about what was going on in Shakespeare's time, kind of the more everyday stuff or logistical stuff. Then I have 2 editions of Hamlet. One is the 1604, the second quarto. This is a facsimile reproduction of the Huntington Library copy. And the reason I have this one is because it does differ from the first folio edition. And they're both pretty long. There is the first quarto, which is kind of messed up. You don't really want that one. It's not nearly long enough. But the second quarto is actually substantial, and if I remember correctly, in some speeches it is longer, and no one really knows which one is the most authoritative, so to say. Then of course John Donne, one of my favorites, metaphysical poet. His prose writing is just so enjoyable to read. And then this is a little bit out of order, I think. I was trying to do these mostly chronologically, but I'm pretty sure Philip Sidney would come before these. But we have a facsimile of Astrophil and Stella. And then we have prose works of Sir Philip Sidney. I got volume 4 because it has the old version of the Arcadia. Thomas Nash, The Unfortunate Traveler, in facsimile. Really interesting novel to read. The only unfortunate thing is the facsimile is in black letter, so it makes it pretty difficult to read to start off, but then once you get the hang of it, it's not too bad. And then I think I will end, we'll end at the start of the next row. So I have 2 editions of the Anatomy of Melancholy. The one on the left is, of course, the NYRB edition that got me interested in it. And then on the right, we have a facsimile of the first printing, the 1621 edition. He did keep adding to it, so that is missing a decent amount of stuff that he added when he died in the 1650s, I think. But I just love being able to read the original versions and seeing how it was put out first, what it looked like, how it was set up. And so I got that. Another author I want to talk more about is George Chapman. So you know him from Chapman's Homer. He did translations, Elizabethan translations of the Iliad and the Odyssey, which I believe Princeton puts out. I do have them, I just haven't found them in my mess. But he also has early poems that are fascinating. The Shadow of Night, and then a poem about Ovid. And his early poems, it reminds me a lot of Robert Browning, where his early poems were excellent, but they were on the more complicated or difficult end, so they never really got the recognition they deserve. Then, of course, later on, because he was such an excellent poet, he was able to translate the Iliad and Odyssey, and that's what got him his renown. But I want to make a video about him because people generally either don't know about or underappreciate his early poetry. He also did some pretty famous plays at the time, historical plays. And then down here, we'll end here. So I have the Oxford 400th anniversary quatercentenary edition of the King James Version of the Bible. They did change it a little bit though, because the original edition was in black letter and this one isn't. And I will end there because this next section kind of is the next generation after the Elizabethans. So I'll end there, and hope you enjoyed this video. Like I said, let me know if I'm missing any additions or anything that's important. Any lesser known writers maybe that I might have just missed, but I know I have some decent gaps in here, but I'm not going necessarily for a totally comprehensive selection. I'm more going for comprehensive and the highest quality. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this. If you liked it, I might do the rest because I have the 1700s through here, 1800s, a lot of Library of America, modernism, kind of going in through the 50s, under the volcano, and then Gaddis, McCarthy, Pynchon, Gil Orlovitz, and the rest. So hope you enjoyed. I'll be posting more videos because I'm on summer break. So death is a gang boss.